tonight we are pleased to have with us former University of Western Ontario professor Dr. Wilson Bryan Key. Dr. Key is an expert in the field of subliminal advertising, and he's written many books including Subliminal Seduction, Media, Sexploitation, and The Clam Plate Orgy. Dr. Key is also coming out with 2 new books of Subliminal Adventures in Erotic Art and The Age of Manipulation. As of late, Dr. Key has been responsible for putting together the Judas Priest double suicide case in Reno, Nevada, which is now pending in Supreme Court. Dr. Key has been to Cornell University 2 times prior to this, one time being in '79, and his second visit was '88, just before the senior class got here. We have had a lot of good information passed down to us about Dr. Bryan Key, and I hope you enjoy the lecture. And just to let you know that there's a candlelight dessert immediately following Dr. Key's presentation. It's at Joe's Place, and it's open to all, and all are welcome. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you very much for inviting me back. I'm Bill Key, and for the next hour and 15 minutes or so, I'll give you a slideshow, and I'll try to show you examples of subliminal technique, both in advertising and in fine art. And then we'll turn the lights on, and I'll do my best to field your questions for as long as you want to stay up and argue. I discovered a long time ago, in the early 1970s, my first book was published, that there are ways you can very simply put information into a picture, or a soundtrack, or an audio tape, that will get inside people's heads, affect their behavior, and they'll have no idea there's a game going on. In other words, one of the things I used to find as a student many, many years ago fascinating was people who think they think for themselves. And that's almost an obsession in this country. It's a basic aspect of the so-called democratic tradition. Anybody who lives in a country or a culture where there's $5 billion a year worth of advertising being pumped into their brain pan, who thinks they think for themselves, is in a good deal of trouble. And I hope before the evening is over, you will come to the realization that maybe you are in a great deal of trouble. Okay, before I get into this thing, I have to preface this. I've been told this is the Bible Belt of Western Massachusetts, so I'm going to deal with sensitive material, some of which a few of you will perceive as salacious, obscene, even pornographic. If this kind of thing bothers you, I'm sure there's something more attractive than me on television tonight. So when the lights go out, you can, sort of ease out the back door, and I won't tell anybody. Okay, if you'll, the first of these, put a simple little picture one of my former students put together, and he got to put them on t-shirts. He had half a dozen of different types. And he's merged. Can we get the lights out, please? Everything out, if you would. The whole everything. Photos. All of them. Lights out, please. Especially the spotlights. Okay, we're in now. Everything all the way out, if you would, please. Okay, good enough. Now, you can see these are the 4 harmless little plants, and cartoon plants are not the real thing, of course. And if you look at them for a few moments, you can tell that the plant over on the left is rather gently intertwined a tendril around the plant on its right. You see the tendrils winding gently about its stem. With a little imagination, you can discern which of those blossoms is male, which is female. Now, there are good reasons why we love flowers, especially women. The flower, of course, is the reproductive organ of the plant, and you know all about that. Now, by contrast, the third plant over, the one with the big head, is kind of alienated, leaning away from the first 2, trying to make out with the 4th plant, which has already lost its flower. Now, of course, what I'm really talking about here are the birds and the bees. And over on the left, the first plant, you can see the little bluebird perched on a leaf. And down at the bottom here, the bumblebee buzzing about. Now, what I've been describing for you would be called, in art criticism, probably, I'm talking about content, what the picture is about. Foreground, subject matter, this kind of thing. Now, a number of theorists, many, many years ago, conjured that there was another dimension, another visual dimension, which they call ground. If you can get information into ground here would be the white area. There's nothing terribly threatening about the white area. But if you put information in the white area, you're looking at figure. You're not even thinking about ground. Well, that material would go into the unconscious part of your brain. Unconscious, subconscious, phylum, deep mind, third brain, subliminal. There's a whole lot of words go with it. We really don't understand what it's all about. We do know what it can do to some extent. But I don't think any of those theorists, especially the Gestalt people, ever were able to make sense of it. They never found an example of it. Well, let me show you, this white area here is very inert, quite harmless, until you get down here just above the grass. And notice the white space curves about and forms a letter. Take your time, no rush. And of course, now most of you have seen the second letter, the vertical, the horizontals, the E. And finally over here, the two diagonals, the X. Now, that word sex was in your brain, you could argue, certainly almost the speed of light, instantaneously. Perception is instantaneous and it's total. Everything goes into your brain. Some mechanism in your brain, which is variously described in theory, sorts this out, and as little as 1/1000th of a person, assuming you could stop a visual percept at some point in time, as little as 1/1000th of that would be consciously available. Now, there are techniques that I've run into that you can actually expand consciousness. You can bring more of your perception to the conscious level. But that word sex was in your brain the moment this thing went on the screen, instantaneously. All I did was bring it up to the cognitive or conscious level, which often produces a little tickle. No great big deal. It makes you laugh a little bit sometimes. Okay, let's go plunging on to something a little more dramatic. Next slide. Oh, I have the clicker up here. Wait, hold on. Okay, can we get that one in focus, please? Now, you would have to be both deaf, dumb, and blind not to be aware of who the smooth character is and the role he's been playing in our lives the last few years. Now, this is R.J. Reynolds Nabisco. Smooth character was actually designed about 1977 in England. Was used, the camel cartoon was used in Europe a number of times. R.J. Reynolds Nabisco purchased this in 1985 and spent 3 years, a man named, spent 3 years refining it and aiming it at a particular demographic, which you have to aim at if you expect to sell cigarettes. Now, if you'll check out the JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, December 11th last year, there are 4 or 5 articles there by medical school professors, physicians, who did a national study of this particular ad. They were very disturbed at some of the things they were observing. Kids around high schools and universities wearing the smooth character t-shirts. The increase, substantial increase among camel smoking among women and among young people. So they did a study of this thing and they discovered that this was aimed, can you sharpen the focus please? It says to touch off. Yeah, no, not the zoom out, the one on top. Yeah, that's it. Okay, bring it in. Oh, okay, you got it. They discovered that this was aimed at a median age of about 13, with young people as young as 6 years old being able to identify the smooth character with the product equal to being able to identify Mickey Mouse with the Disney logo. So, having years ago worked on quite a few projects for various tobacco companies doing research, anybody who sells cigarettes knows there are 2 ways to gain customers for your brand in cigarette marketing. One, you steal them or pirate them from some other brand. You get them to switch brands. Nobody in the history of tobacco has ever figured out how to do this. Nobody I ever knew would spend 30 cents trying to do it because the results are totally unpredictable, they're uncontrollable. Most of the time it simply won't work. Now the only reliable way to get people to smoke your brand is to catch them when they take their first puff. And in this country that's a little before the age of 13 at the moment. And now you ideally want to get them 1 to 2 years before they take their first drag. And you indoctrinate them, you legitimatize the product and the brand, and if they start smoking your brand, they will smoke for a particular period, and we one time made a multidimensional algebraic matrix to try to handle the many variables involved in this thing. But typically they will smoke the brand for a certain period of time, and they will quit. They will switch to another brand. And then later on in life, they will continue to come back to the brand they initiated smoking with. So once you've hooked them, you've got a lifelong consumer. As they puff their way towards oblivion through cancer, pardon me, emphysema, and a dozen other medical pathologies. No, they die off pretty quick if they start young enough. And so those articles in JAMA, I called it one of the professors. Most of this came, I think, it initiated out of the University of Georgia Medical School. And I called one of the researchers, and we talked. And he was familiar with my books, so he asked me to take a look at this. Well, can you sharpen that focus? The slide is bending as it gets hot and slipping out. You know that this person here, the smooth charger, is a rascal. And you know that. You can see the little twinkle in his eye. The design of the face was based upon the fellow in Miami Vice and 007. And the bow tie, of course. Now, you don't know how you know what he's thinking, but you know what he's thinking. And the reason you know what he's thinking is because of the bow, the failing bow of that submarine rising upward out of the water. Now, Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, a lot of other people like that, have used background information simply to indicate thought going on in the mind of the subject or pending actions. I mean, this has been going on for 5 or 6 centuries at least, so there's nothing new about it. And now, oh, by the way, his attire is curious because he is dressed like a person, like a man. And the bow tie, I haven't worn a necktie, I guess, in 20 years. Not since I found out what they mean. The necktie, of course, is a phallic symbol. And when I used to run a corporation, and I had $90, $100 neckties. They were wider, longer, more colorful than anybody else's in the company. And God help anybody who ever came to the office in the morning with a tie that was fancier than mine. He was in a lot of trouble. Now, a necktie is interesting. You remember when Tom Jones is on stage? I live out in Reno, and so we have these people coming and going all the time in the casinos. And he does a warm-up song or two as he begins his show. And he's all dressed. He has his tuxedo on and his necktie tied very tightly. And at some point, usually in the second number, he reaches up after he's captured the audience's attention, and he slowly unties that necktie. And you can hear the women going, Sinatra did the same thing. All of these singers use the microphone, of course, as a phallic symbol quite well. I guess they take a course at UCLA or something in this, because they're very good at it. Anyway, the necktie is very, very significant. Now, the only person he could be thinking about is that young woman in the background with the scuba costume on. Now, that seems to be fair enough, except he is an animal, a camel, and she is a woman. Now, every nation on this earth, every civilized nation, has very stringent legal prohibitions against sex between animals and humans. Now, remember, this is all manufactured to hit a demographic with a median age of 13 and induce the consumption at that age of a substance that's highly toxic. If you're still smoking cigarettes, you probably have to be classified as a loser, because that's exactly what you're into. Now, let me ask you to do something just briefly. Take your thumb and hold your thumb over the smooth character's eye. Just block off the eyes and ask yourself what you're looking at. Steady, steady. Okay, in case some of you missed it, why I cut it out just to show you. And of course you've all seen that before. Isn't that clever? What people won't do for money? The mouth is very... Now remember, this thing wasn't sketched. It was developed using survey research nationally over a 3-year period by a man named Bob Cole, the Vice President in charge of Art Director of McCann Erickson International. And so we take the mouth and we turn the painting upside down. We just look at the mouth upside down. There you go. Yeah, it's exactly what you think it is. We ran it down to the University of Nevada Medical School Department of Anatomy, and it is a very close proximity to a female genital. So the smooth character turns out really to be an hermaphrodite. Now, those of you who've been wearing this thing on your t-shirts and parading around the campus thinking as you were adding the attributes of the smooth character to your personality ought to think a little bit deeper about what's going on here. Now, I was a Camel smoker, World War II, and the Camel has always been a macho man's cigarette. And we used to sit around the barracks at night and hand pass the Camel pack back and forth. And remember how we looked at this Camel? That Camel was designed in 1913. About 1950, they did some significant changes, modifications to it, and I'll show you what they were a little later. But the Camel, this is not a real camel, this is a cartoon camel, a sketch camel, looking to the left. Now, in the camel's foreleg, there seems to be a little man standing here. He has a head, he has hair up here, he has a recognizable face, the neck would be right about in here. The right arm, elbow sticking out, and the hand on his hip, and the torso going down. This would be his right leg, he's looking to the rear, and this would be his left leg. Now, he's not been doing much there all these years, except he has an erection. Little thing sticking out there in front. So we had to deal with the hermaphrodite, and now we've got a dicky waiver. Now I'll show you a version of this that's where it's been marked and one of the original, the real thing, so to speak, and you can compare them. Now, about 1950, a woman in Denver some months ago came up after a lecture, gave me a group of old Life magazines with camel ads. And before 1950, the figure here had a triangular head, and his penis was smaller. So about 1950, they sort of redid him, and we have what we're living with today. Now, one curious thing about this, from now on, for the rest of your lives, you're never going to forget this. Once you bring this stuff up to cognitive level, it almost indelibly marks itself in your memory system. You might want to forget this sometime, but you can't. Were we to meet 10 years from now and have lunch together, you would be able to give me almost a complete inventory of every one of these pictures. Which is really, you can remember what was going on in your classrooms that well, you'd only fly by the count. But of course you can't. No, bringing this stuff to conscious memory, you never forget it. It has an incredible effect upon memory. And also memory at the non-conscious or unconscious level, subliminal level, as well as at the conscious level. Okay, let's go moving along. Now, this was an ad that appeared repeatedly in Playboy, Penthouse, the so-called, again, a magazine designed for the young American middle-class, upper-middle-class macho, the preppies. And we look at this, now, at first glance, what we had done with this was, it was in, I think, 2 or 3 magazines in 1 month. We set up, forgive me, we set up a test situation in a physician's office. And we put a videotape camera behind a one-way mirror. And for a month, we taped people looking at this ad and other ads in a number of select magazines. And one curious thing about this, now a page in Playboy at that time would cost, $80,000, $90,000 in 4 colors. And you get for that, it's in 6 million copies, and it's read by 4.85 readers per copy. You're pushing 25 million people in the audience who will see your ad. But nobody looked at this ad for more than a second or two. They would hit the ad and just sort of look at it for a moment and rush on towards the centerfold where all the important data was stored. And so if you were a shareholder in a Canon Cologne Corporation, you saw nobody paying attention to your ad, you might be justified in becoming very angry. Unless you knew that perception was instantaneous and total. Ads are made to be read in less than a fraction of a second. If they don't work at that point, forget it. They're not going to work. They're not intended to be studied. Only people do that with my students. And so when you think about this ad and nobody paying attention, there's not really anything there to see, is it? It's not a dumb ad. But think for a minute about the left hand holding the Canon bottle. Look at your own left hand and look for similarities and differences. This is one of the ways you test reality all the time. This was a strange hand. Notice the from the nail on the thumb to the knuckle, and the distance of the knuckle down to the base of the thumb, where it joins the wrist, is totally disproportionate to your hand. Nobody's hand looks like that. In fact, I'm rather astonished at you future leaders of our nation you thought this was a hand. What made you think it was a hand? You want to believe it's a hand, of course you believe anything you wish. That's not a hand. And look, if it's a hand, where are the fingers? There should be, maybe he lost his finger somewhere, but there should be some fingers in it. No fingers. My God, what's the matter with you people? Well, look, this is a rather curious little illusion. We have the thumb, and we with some obvious incorrect anatomy. But we also have, on the other side of this, testicles and an erect male genital. Take a moment. All of you who have had Psych 101 have looked at the vase and the faces, the duck and the rabbit, the Rubens profiles, two-sided illusions. I rarely have met a psychologist who had the slightest suspicion there was a practical application to this little toy. Well, here's an example. On one side, you have something salacious. Remember, these are young men who perceive themselves as machos, looking at an erect male genital in the middle of Playboy. It should make you a little suspicious about those readers, especially if you are one of them. Think about that. So what they've done is simply, you repress, the audience here represses the genitalia. When we tested this on campus, 98% of the young men we tested, we had about 200-300 cases, we had a lot of people in it, saw nothing here but a hand. Surprisingly, about 1/3 of the women we checked saw the genital. Now, they wouldn't admit this openly. I mean, women keep secrets quite often. I have 5 daughters, I know about this. But they did see the genital. If you had run this ad in Cosmopolitan or Today's Woman's, you would have been in a lot of trouble. Enough women would have seen it, would have checked with each other and written their congressman, and who knows what might have happened at Canada. So, but nobody did, because men, unlike women, are very straight. Everything's always what it appears to be. So nobody saw anything at all wrong with this. Now notice the cork, the knife on the cork. It's about to slip, and when it does, whoosh, but it gets you where you live, so to speak. That's pretty powerful stuff. Look, there is no way to even talk about this picture in terms of cognitive psychology. most of which, in my opinion, is a lot of nonsense. Wishful thinking about how we wish the indentation system worked. Neat and clean, and everything adds into chi-squares and so forth, and it's bull. As I say, in terms of cognitive psychology, there's nothing here. This is a powerful piece of emotional stimuli involving castration, appeal to latent homosexuality, etc., etc., etc. Now, I'm sure most of you by now have seen the little dog down here. The floppy ear, top of the eye, the nose, bottom of the jaw. Could be a Cocker Spaniel, I guess. But of course the dog is dead. He has a chisel through his head. Now, how a dead Cocker Spaniel will sell canning cologne, your guess is as good as mine. But somebody went to a lot of trouble to paint that in. This painting, which it is a painting, it's not a picture, not a photograph of reality. There's no reality here. Oh, by the way, the four fingers that we missed, I thought those were intriguing. That should have tipped you off if you had looked at the fingers. You should have spotted the genital. But nobody ever seems to do that. See, you're not supposed to see this stuff if you play the game the way the media have designed the game to be played. And when you start finding this, you will discover you may become very unpopular with your roommates. But, okay, let's go moving on. Now, this is a Canadian ad, which ran, 4 years consecutively in Canada. And I had a couple of students who worked in the computer rooms at several of the chain department stores, and were able to give me some information on sales and so forth. The inventories would come in very heavy in the late spring, and these things would sell out in a matter of 3 or 4 weeks. They completely exhaust the inventory. And as you can see, the swimming suits are based upon the Union Jack and the Canadian Maple Leaf. These are very stirring nationalistic symbols. Of course, you heard about it last week. Upside down, I got very upset. My wife is Canadian, and she was in the backyard with my 14-year-old daughter, running around with her flag, pointing upward to all the neighbors. And but these are very important symbols to Canadians. Now, there's something a little haywire here. Now, Janssen, we assume, has a lot of swimming suits. And this thing was on large point-of-sale cardboard displays in the stores. It appeared in all of the magazines and newspapers throughout Canada. And notice this poor girl's trunks. They sag in front. Those unsightly wrinkles. And down in the back, it's sort of zooming down. Those are horrible fit. I mean, that's just clear. Now, by contrast, the young man, his fits very snugly, especially down here in the crotch. So it might make you a little suspicious if you thought critically about things like this, which you've not been trained to do. Also, you might have noticed that his design goes with the bra. This is a separate kind of design, completely separate. So we sent some students out to the stores, and sure enough, his shorts were being sold with that bra. This was sold separately. Now, you may have noticed that this young woman has a zipper on the front of her sewing trunks. Now, I certainly don't have to tell you that women do not require a zipper on the front of their sewing trunks. It's completely redundant. So, put very simply, he's wearing hers, and she's wearing his. And in our nice Anglo-Saxon heritage, men are not supposed to wear women's clothes. This may be changing thanks to our dear friends on Madison Avenue as time goes by, but traditionally this is somewhat unacceptable. Now, there's a little curious thing. See, this looks like two people at the beach. It's not. These photographs were done separately. There's a black line where they were cut apart, and they were all pasted together. This is all done with computer image enhancement now. No, these days it was a composite piece of art done by hand, and it's very time-consuming, but the technique allows you to control every square centimeter of the ad. And you notice this hand, or she's got her hand on her hip. Now you look at that hand for a moment, you stop. Can you put your hand on your hip like that? Only if your arm is some 9 feet long. I spent a whole hour class period one time with having a girl in the class stand and try to get their hand in that position. Now that position is very approximate to a, what would be called a sensitive area. And you just wouldn't let anybody put their hand there. So what these rascals have suggested here is what I hope you're studying French, because we're still trying to catch up in English. French have words for practically everything. Ménage à trois. There is a third person there, a woman off camera, with her hand in near an erogenous area. So he's like, you can't trust anybody anymore. Now, this water was curious because if you've ever been to the beach, water doesn't look like that. It doesn't even look remotely like that. It's painted water. Like the figures, it's been done with our technique. Now, I'm going to turn the water upside down. You see the puckered up lips down here, the nose and the two eyes. Reminded me of remember the weatherman in the Farmer's Almanac who's at the North Pole blowing the icy winds down across the hemisphere. Of course, that's not exactly what's going on here. Let me take you back to the real thing for a moment. There you go. Isn't this fun? Okay, as I say, this was an extremely effective ad campaign. And it sold, as for 4 years I knew about, that this king came out every year, and it sold these things like hotcakes. Oh. Now, there's a technique used here that's used quite frequently in art. It's been talked about before, I think, more by philosophers, called synesthesia. It's a crossover sensory effect. You look at something, you have a visual stimuli, which produces an olfactory, a smell reaction. Now you look at this, you can just smell that chocolate. Can't you smell it? It's great. If you're a chocolate freak, just push your around the wall. I can even taste that chocolate. I can get a gustatory response from this visual stimuli. Of course, now this is a painting. It has nothing to do with cake at all. It's a fabric, the whole thing is fake. Moistness. It tells us there have been moist layer cakes before, but now there's super moist. Isn't that thrilling? Well, moisture is a tactile experience. And you can feel the moistness in that cake. You've never seen a real piece of real cake as moist as this. Now, it's a superb piece of art, cost somebody close to $50,000 in art production, and was in use for 5 years in Reader's Digest, all of the women's magazines in the country. And I must believe, because these are very serious people, it sold a great many packages of Betty Crocker. Almost everybody in the world has eaten Betty Crocker. Okay, there's something in this. There's a dissonance. There's something haywire with this. Now you gave $50,000 for this painting. You can get, how big is a piece of cake? Well, either the cake is the size of a postage stamp, or this fork is the size of a hay fork. One way or the other. You can't have it both. And now this was probably painted under a magnification lens, a large one, a grain at a time, and it is a masterpiece. As I say, it's got the taste, it's got the smell, it's got the visual impact, and it even has a tactile moistness. And notice particularly the chocolate icing. It's magnificently sculpted. Of course, it wasn't really sculpted, it was actually just painted on with an airbrush. Now the problem with this icing on the cake is a metaphor in the English, in the American language. It has some interesting things when you put the icing on the cake. An interesting colloquial expression. But the icing up here is a big blob. Now if you were looking at that perspective you're looking at from, that should be about the same thickness as this. It's like somebody had a gob of chocolate icing left and they just sort of threw it on the heel of the cake. But then you look at that heel of the cake carefully, and something has been done, almost sculptured into it. You'll forget the expression, I'll show you a blow-up. There you go. Now again, we chase down to the Department of Anatomy at the medical school, and this is a very accurate representation of a female genital. There are Latin words for these various folds here, labia majora, labia minora, the clitoris, and so forth. Everything is there, it's very complete. And of course, they made it chocolate, which gives it kind of an ethnic flavor. Okay, let's move it on. This is a curious one that I found profoundly upsetting when I first ran into it. It came in on a term paper. A young man who wrote it just finished his doctorate in clinical psych from Columbia. And he analyzed the relationship between the 14 people in the app. It was a superb term paper. He also noted that these two players on the ice are not fighting, they're funning. If you want to hurt somebody, you don't hit them like this player on top is hitting them. And you go look at their eyes, they're laughing, they're funning, they're joking, roughhousing. Now, whatever it is they're fighting over, we don't know what the referee's thinking because we can't see his eyes. In our culture, when you can't see somebody's eyes, they're hiding something. Or they haven't made up their mind yet. His whistle, however, is out here at arm's reach. He's not about yet to blow the whistle. So whatever the issue at stake here is, he's not decided what to do about it. Now, as we look at the picture down there, can you make that just a little smaller? No, the other way. The other way. Turn the zoom on. Yeah, that's okay. Now we're in focus. The glove here on the ground. The glove is a left-handed glove. Now, when a gauntlet is cast down, this for several thousand years, the salt glove is an archetypal symbol. It's a challenge, suggesting that whatever these two men are arguing about is a challenge to them. And you note here on the back that Cooper International Limited in Toronto is the world's largest manufacturer of hockey equipment. And these things up here says Cooper. This is the international registered trademark of the Cooper Corporation on the hockey glove. Except when you look at that carefully, it doesn't say Cooper. We did micro blow-ups. Can you get that sharp focus as much as possible, please? And make the large with the zoom arm as large as the goal. Yeah, that's it. But now let's get focused. It doesn't say Cooper. And it's been manipulated into the word cancer. Now, it doesn't seem reasonable that Philip Morris International, who owns Benson and Hedges, cancer in a multi-million-dollar investment in the cigarette market. But that's exactly what they're doing. Now, theoretically, you can argue a number of things. They're appealing to the death wish, which is one of the most well-articulated theories in psychology, going back to at least to 1545 in the writings of Thomas Hobbes. The Freudians got onto this in the late 19th century, in the early 20th. Eric Fromm's last book before he died was called On Human Self-Destructiveness. If you're working around drug and alcohol abuse clinics, you're well aware that self-destructiveness is a very viable theory, which is very useful. There are people, many of us, especially the young, who seem to be courting disaster. They are purposely designing their lifestyle in such a way that they're going to be destroyed by it, killed or worse. And so and cigarettes, as I mentioned before, cigarette ads are aimed at young people, where this business of death wish would be more prominent. Young people have always been a pain. As far back as Socrates, he wrote about them. You know, they hack each other to pieces out in the street, and nowadays they flew around hang gliders and motorcycles and joined the Green Berets and this kind of stuff. Now, this could be a normal part of the maturation process, whereby they eventually achieve separation from parental authority, they establish a sexual identity. And I say it could be quite normal. It's simply been appropriated here in the interest of marketing cigarettes, using a death wish. Because there's no way they can argue in court that this was an accident. This was very purposefully, very calculatedly done in order to sell cigarettes. Okay, The Clam Plate Orgy is the title of my third book, which was displayed most often in cookbook sections of bookstores across the country. And I dedicated the book to those nice people at Howard Johnson who've done so much to enrich our lives. And we discovered this one night in San Diego. I was staying at Howard Johnson Motel, and half a dozen students and I went back to the restaurant and had dinner, and 4 of the 6 of us ordered clam plates. And wondered after we made the order, because these clam plate, these posters, these placemats were on the table, but everyone said that no, they hadn't looked at them, they hadn't read them, they hadn't thought about them. But we had to have seen them for perhaps just a very brief moment before we made our order. So we started psyching it out, and the first thing we discovered was, well, first of all, the clam plate. Can you sharpen that focus? Yeah, good. Now, we are inside the boat looking out. That porthole is secure. This is the dissonance part of it. The only way you could reach your hand through that porthole, you'd have to unscrew that wing nut and open the thing, and then get your hand out there and pluck one of those tender, succulent clams off the plate. Or you might run to the back of the boat, jump up on the wharf, and run back down to where they were, but by that time they'd be cold. So you kind of wonder why didn't they have an open porthole? I mean, why not be logical? And this is so illogical. Well, right in the center of that clam plate, which is an ellipse, is a dot. You see a very large dot here. And we kept wondering, if that dot were randomly, just somebody threw a dot into the clam plate, this is a painting, of course, and we knew that. It could land anywhere, but this right exactly in the center. And around, are we in focus? Yeah, you have to stay on to that. Around the dot is another elliptical shape, like an A. Little triangle on top, a neck coming back here, a thin pipe. And this could be the eye, the ear, the neck, and the back arching upward and down, 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 down to the knee, and the leg extending backward to the foot. The 4 legs extending down like so. A donkey and a clam plate on a Tuesday night at Howard Johnson's in San Diego? Come on. That doesn't make sense. So these are rather exciting discoveries, and we kept plunging on. And the next clam here seems to have a face of a man. It's his eyes, short hair, there's a mustache going across the face, his chin, neck, his right arm extending down into the pile, his torso from the neck extending down, and the donkey appears to be licking his tummy down to the genital and the legs doubled up below. So we have a man lying prostrate with a donkey licking his tummy. And of course, by this time, we're attracting a certain amount of attention among the people in the restaurant, and the waitress was looking curiously at us. And so these are exciting discoveries. Once you get into them, you stay up all night sometimes. So the third clam we looked at was this one here. Our light was good. She has 2 little round eyes, a round nose, and an open mouth. Hair piled up around her head like so. The neck would be across here. Shoulder line running from here across here. Her left arm would be pointed upward. Her right arm downward into the pile. And her torso, body extending down. Her waist would be about here, the hip, right hip, on the right leg going down. Now just adjacent to a round object, which seems to have 2 eyes, a nose, and another mustache, with the hair combed down over the forehead, prompting one of my students saying, "Good grief, it looks like Adolf Hitler." Well, Hitler hiding in a clam plate at Howard Johnson, I doubt that. That's not even credible. But To make it all very simple, 8 people and a donkey involved in a sexual orgy. Everything's going on, and in that plate that could be going on. I mean, take your pick. The busy little tablet. And see, whatever these things are in that plate, they're not fried clams. The first thing we notice is always first thing you check. Compare the picture with the real thing. And what we had on our 4 plates was quite different than what was in this picture. I mean, there's no comparison. Whatever those are, they're not fried clams. Well, 8 bodies and a donkey. And so it knocks your faith in nature, doesn't it? Up here we have something else, an S and an E, and over here an X. Now one night the students brought about 1.5 pounds of parsley over, and we sat at the kitchen table all night. And you don't get the word sex in real parsley. You only get that in art departments. So they juiced this up pretty good. This is the secret behind all of these merchandising schemes. They're operated at these subliminal levels. Now, this does more to you than simply sell you a plate of fried clams. Because every human being in that restaurant perceives this at the speed of light. And it's in their brain system perhaps permanently, forever, feeding its way back into behavior in ways we're very uncertain about. Very uncertain about. So this could be doing a growth. What would happen if you put this kind of media into a place like Iran, a fundamentalist Muslim country, where people are very uptight, very restrained about reproductive behavior? Now, putting this thing into their, I think we already did it. Because when the CIA gave the Shah of Iran his job and sustained him in power all those years, these American corporations were operating high, wide, and handsome, with placemats and the whole bit. Okay, let's go on with this. Okay, last September, Forbes did an article on me, really good one. 3 months prior to that, I had been in a number of conversations with one of their editors. He would call, and we had very pleasant, long telephone conversations. And when he first called, Forbes, I kept getting Forbes and Fortune mixed up in my head because I never read any of them. And I was thinking of Forbes. I'm using in my college lectures, I'm using a portrait of Malcolm Forbes. This was his obituary, published right after he died. And this oil portrait, acrylic painting of Malcolm, a handsome man, interesting man. And it says up there, 1919, 1990, while alive, he lived. And indeed, he seems to have lived. And so the editor, I spoke speaking of him, he said, my God, I got one of those pictures on the wall behind my desk. And he spun around in his chair and he looked at it. And he said, down in the lobby, if you go into the Forbes building, I think it's on 5th Avenue, you walk in the big skyscraper, you walk in the front door in the lobby, and there's a 30-foot reproduction of this painting in the lobby. And I said, okay, now look at Malcolm as he's seated here in his racing costume. He is a very handsome man. And look down around between his legs, and look at what is emanating from his trousers. And he shrieked. He almost fell off his chair, he said. And let me give you an enlargement of that, in case you think I exaggerate. What happened in Forbes, I don't know if the damn thing is still there or not. But once you perceive this stuff in art, from that day forward, the only thing you can see up there is what's between his legs. It becomes the dominant perception. You cannot stop your eye from going when you walk in the building in the morning. First thing you look at is Malcolm's ding dong. And so I was surprised. They did a very good piece on me in September, I think it was September 4th issue. And I destroyed Malcolm Forbes' portrait, I suppose. Okay, go back and you can look at the real thing for a moment. Actually, funny what he must have paid for that portrait. Okay, you've all seen this commercial. It's on the air right now. You never guess who the client is, who the sponsor. There's about a 25-second, 30-second commercial. This attractive young couple are out in the park. It's fall, it's cold. They're having a picnic. They've just finished eating. And you can see a lot of innuendo going on here, the expression on her face and what she's looking at, and the way he's holding that loaf of bread and what he's looking at. And there's a lot of that. You can do a whole life experience in a 30-second commercial. And finally, the basket is packed, and she puts a little thing over the top of the basket. She starts off, she picks up the basket, they start off towards the sunset. And she stumbles. She almost drops the basket. She's jiggling that basket around, and the whole thing almost went on the ground. And the young man gallantly runs to her rescue, and he helps her and tries to keep the basket from falling. And in about 4 frames, a rascal.
Oh, wow.
Now, to shoot something like this, you would have probably for about 2 days. There's so many variables you have to have happening at the same time. The angles and so forth and the action. If anybody gets wise to it, you're in trouble, but they know what it does. And as I say, oops, having trouble up here. The next scene, get the little lid. Indeed. Okay. Well, I don't have to explain this one. Isn't that awful? Have you tried our newest one of a kind? Come on now. Okay, let's go on. That's been in every newspaper in the country, by the way. Here, this is a good one for you. Now, Sheila Ann Delon, a rather formidable young woman. We know she's left-handed. She has this long piece of chalk in her hand. And a serious young woman. She's from Hampton, Virginia. She's 28, a physicist. Hobbies, ballet, sailing, car racing, chess, the usual thing. Very serious young woman. And the problem with the picture, and all of these D1 things are very cleverly done and very successful. What is she thinking about? Come on, you guys. Anybody? Right, she's thinking about sin. She is surrounded by sin. Sin, 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 sin. The funniest part of this one that I thought was funny was, it says, the last book read, Beyond Freedom and Dignity, Skinner, the radical behaviors who denied the existence of the unconscious. Skinner says, if you don't smell it, taste it, touch it, feel it, forget it. Not important. Probably one of the most destructive influences American psychology has ever had to survive. I knew Skinner. I was teaching at BU when he was at Harvard, and we used to be amused by him. He was not, as it turned out, amusing. Okay. There are many famous apes among mermaids. There is one. Now, this is all fake. The rock has been painted, the cars have been painted, the water's been painted. It's all been airbrushed together. I'll just show you briefly the top, oops, focus please, the top ice cube. And all we have to do is turn it upside down. Remember, your brain receives information upside down quite readily in various kinds of distorted forms. Again, using the death wish or self-destruction as a motif to sell a highly addictive substance, which is guaranteed to mess up the lives of a good many people who use it. Oh, I taught in my misspent youth, I think at BU, I had a course in photography for a while, and if one of my students ever brought a thing like this in, I'd have them redo it or I would have flunked it. It's a mess. Out of focus, all screwed up, like it might have been taken with a cat's eye lens of some kind, and you don't know what's going on here. It's an ad for the gold the gold producers of America, the Gold Jewelry Association of America, get you to buy more gold jewelry. But you don't know, is this a neck piece, a belt, a shoulder piece? We don't know. We can't tell for sure. And this woman, I mean, you can't see most of her. She's out of focus. This one's fairly much in focus. The guy here, I guess her husband, who just gave her this gold doodad and kissing her on the bare shoulder. Except when you start looking at this face a little more, the area between the bottom of the nose and the upper lip is a little different on men than it is on women. In this case, it's very feminine here. The lips are quite feminine. Her hair is shown here, very long, as a different texture than her hair shown over here, which is very fine texture. So either they have simply made something gender ambiguous on purpose, for certainty, or this is one woman kissing another woman on the bare left shoulder, which you really wouldn't expect to find in the covers of Time magazine, Newsweek, U.S. News and World Report, Business Week, etc., etc. And, okay, this is the dissonance. Now, I had this thing around the house for about 3 weeks, and my daughters are pretty good at psyching them out. On a table, one or two at a time, a coffee table near the front door. As you come in and out of the house, you pick it up, look at it for a couple of seconds. Put it down. Don't sit and stare at it. You block it out more strongly. And usually about the second or third day, we hit it, we find it. This one we didn't. It was there for 3 weeks. And nobody could find out. We knew something was going on in here, but we couldn't pin it down. So finally one day I said, oh, the devil with it, let's get on with something else. Took it back to my office and just sort of threw it down on the typewriter table, and it landed upside down. And that's what you get for gold jewelry. Now, you know, you may not want that, but that's part of the deal here. Birthing position. And notice I'll go back again how this is done. This is a rather brilliant piece of photography in terms of what you have to be able to carry in your mind in order to put it together, make it work. I knew this. And because they repeated this for several months in all these national magazines, this must have been working. Okay, take advantage of a softie. Well, can you make that as large as possible, please? Get that, yeah, please, thank you. Notice this little ridge that comes down here, and ask yourself where you have seen a ridge like that in nature. It's relatively common. Half the population of the world has one. It's a coronal ridge on the glans at the head of the penis, part of male reproductive equipment. And back here you have sort of a glans, there's another one here sticking out within a glans, all perched on the edge of that knife blade, which has just cut all of this off of something. And remember that all that golden, rich parquet goodness is ultimately intended to be placed in someone's mouth. Well, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? Now this, you're looking at a $5 million investment that went on for 5 or 6 years in every woman's magazine in the country. Every one of them. And had I not put it in one of my books, I'm sure they would still be using it. I was offended. This thing really annoyed the hell out of me. Because in the copy line here, the last line says, "Guess that's what happens when you're an old softy." Now that's hitting below the belt. Oh, if you think I exaggerate, I thought you'd give you an enlargement. Okay, Gaddafi, this was published in Time a few days after the attack upon the Libyan, the country of Libya, where we killed a number of Libyans, including one of his daughters, and two of our pilots, Navy pilots, died in the attack. And there was a long 10-page story, it was a cover story in this issue, justifying the American attack. Now, we originally justified this attack, and we bombed them because there had been a discotheque in West Germany blown up, where 2 American servicemen were killed and a number of others were badly injured. Somehow, Mr. Reagan was going to tell us why he did this. He was going to give us all the dope, so to speak. He never did. So we were stuck with the story. And about a year later, another story came out that no, this was not a Libyan group that blew up that discotheque. It was a Syrian group. But then most Americans couldn't tell you, Libya, Syria, who knows, but don't even know where they are. So, all sneaky, all of them are sneaky. So when this came out, I was intrigued by this portrait. It was done by a man named Hirsch, who does many such acrylic portraits for time. He did one on the Ayatollah Khomeini at the end of the Carter administration, where they had the crisis over the hostages. And he does a lot of interesting things in his paintings, like the word X here, quite legible. Over here behind the eye, there's a line coming down, curling up under the right eyebrow, the letter S. And here, the letter E, very deftly put in. I'll show you a marked version, I compare it with an unmarked in a moment. And I get the feeling, okay, that's not unusual. He did the same thing to the Ayatollah, plus some other little tricks. But something else here, it took me a whole afternoon to finally pinpoint it. There's a vertical here, diagonal, the letter K. Over here, the letter I, letter L, and the letter L. Kill. Now remember, this is the time when the administration is trying desperately to convince the United States population that this act against Libya was justified. Here's the marked versus the unmarked. And you can perceive over here, the SEX is relatively easy to see, but the K, I, and the LL. They portrayed Gaddafi as a sexualized killer. I don't know anything about Gaddafi. Nobody else does either. So a handsome man, interesting man certainly. He's been in power for a very long time. But you surely wouldn't buy a used car sale from a man like that. So we did a job on it. Now, the trick is, whether Time did this out of its own greed, which is substantial, or whether they got a call from the Oval Office, hey guys, we got a little problem with this Libya thing, what can you do for us? Doesn't matter. What they did was influence at this subliminal level public opinion among the leadership group in the United States to favor that bombing of Libya. And I hope sometime somebody hangs the Time publisher up by the heel, because he's got it coming. It's an example of using these techniques to manipulate U.S. foreign policy. And I'm sure we did a lot of this during the various Panama and the other little adventures our military has been on. One of the things that was a few weeks ago, you remember the yellow ribbons? Guess who worked that out? Hill and Knowlton. This huge public relations firm under a $10 million contract with the Kuwaiti government. I had one on the antenna of my Lincoln, and I sure as I won't put one on again, I can tell you. Okay, the management of public consent. You should be able to see the kill more legibly here in the large version. And the sex, of course. Oh, next time you're in Chicago, I'm glad this is not a Catholic university, I get into trouble with this. I was at the University of Niagara a couple of nights ago, and I used this, and we had some talks after the lecture about propriety. And the Bergoglio crucifix is in the Museum of Fine Art in Chicago. It's been there for about 90 years. They keep it down in a vault, except when there are religious displays to be shown. And they bring out, it was painted by an anonymous artist between 1120 and 1140, early 12th century. And I majored in history as an undergraduate. I was really pleased to suddenly realize that 12th century would not have been a nice time to have lived. Things were pretty grim back there. But somebody had a sense of humor to do this. Of course, they had to be anonymous, so they ended up, the Inquisition would have had them in a bonfire. And I was very touched by the humility shown on the face of the saint. Notice his eye contact, he's looking right at it. An expression on his face of humility, with perhaps a touch of envy. There you go. Now that's not as well crafted as some of the other examples I've shown you, but I'm certain the idea gets through. People at the museum were absolutely stunned when I came up with this, because they were kind enough to give me permission to use it. I published a picture in a book called The Age of Manipulation. And, oh yes, a little international things. There's nothing, stuff's around the world now many times. This is an ad for men's shorts, and as I mentioned earlier, I hope you're studying French because it's an extremely useful language. Now, it's two attractive young people. Well, I say attractive. A young man is not terribly exciting or interesting. He looks kind of vacuous. His expression on his face suggests he's probably been looking at a mirror and combing his hair for the last hour. On the other hand, the young woman, she has a secret. And she's asking you not to tell. As though you knew what there was in here. We spent a week looking at all of these roses. This has all been painted on, it's airbrush painting, it's not the real thing. And we couldn't find anything. Suddenly somebody found on the back of this another ad. There we go. An ad for electrical appliances, a common kind of ad. Toasters and heaters and coffee grinders and warm-up tables and mixers and knives and so forth. And Paris Match is printed on a very thin paper. So as you turn the page, light leaks through the page, and you can find, for just an instant, you will discover her secret. Voila. Now, the student had brought this in. I said, look, I'm not going to buy it. It could be an accident. So you find some way to prove to me that this was done on purpose. It is very hard to match two pages up in this kind of content. So he was, I think, a physics major. He did a statistical analysis. I think there were 97 pages in the book. And there's one chance that 9 of that knife winding up in that particular position. There's one chance in over 1 million. This could have been random. Could have been an accident. So you could bet your next 6 months' pay this was done quite intentionally. Which meant at the time that this whole technology, of which there was not an article or a book anywhere in the world about, had to be known. Somebody knew it. Artists had to know it. Production artists and ad agencies in Paris. And as I say, it was kind of a provocative picture. Okay, let's go on. Okay, this is one of the great ads of this kind of all time. I had this one morning on the 700 Club, and Pat Robertson noticed, before I got on camera, they had this thing out, and I was surprised that before I walked out, Pat Robertson had found the angel in the neck of the glass. He'd also discovered a few other things like this, like he called it a Roman soldier, a helmet, eyes, the nose, the face, and shadow. And he had noticed the bird here. You see the crest on the bird's head, the bird's beak. The lower jaw seems open, so the bird's talking. This swan, there's a dozen, I think it's 15 images in here. I'll show you just a couple of them, give you an idea separately. This swan, a swan was interesting because if you look at a symbol dictionary, you find out the swan has for thousands of years been a symbol of gender ambiguity. You know, the AC/DC problem. Swan, it seems. You remember Elita and her swan, Greek mythology. The swans are used often in Playboy centerfolds as a plastic swan in a swimming pool or a swan pillow on a bed. But they use the swan symbolism quite often. And now a symbol of gender ambiguity in a liquor ad like this made you kind of wonder. Two faces, kind of a somber looking face up here, the mouth and the eyes, the long nose, a little animal face here with the eyes and the mouth and so forth. There are quite a few of those in the ad. And these faces appear very often in liquor ads. Little man who ends up screaming his head off. You see a lot of screaming people in alcohol ads at this level of perception. It's like I assume these people know what they're... Here's our bird again. Notice the crest on the bird's head. And the bird seems to be talking to someone. This bothered us. We couldn't figure out what it was. The shape. We finally came up, there must be some kind of a cutting instrument. Perhaps the head of an axe. Maybe the axe that broke the bottle. Things did not necessarily have to be logical in art. And finally, I just laid it over to the side and outlined the shape of the bottle. The nose here, the eye, shape of the head, back of the head, and the lower jaw, the mouth open here, and the lower jaw formed by that axe or cutting instrument. Now with the open jaw, you notice something here. There's a stump hanging down with a jagged edge. And down here you can see the rest of it. A rather unusual kind of design when you first look into it. And finally, here's the mouth and the little stump coming down and this long object below. And I thought this was very touching. The cut line. Have you ever seen a grown man cry? Now, involving its content with castration for alcohol. I have 100 of these things in files in my office. Castration, yeah, well, if you're a physician, I think they would all back me on this. Alcohol is a chemical castrator. It gives you incredible fantasies, but the real thing, and a good many women will agree with this, I'm sure, the real thing is pretty pathetic. A few ounces of alcohol in the blood of any man or woman, you become sexually inert. But as I say, you do have wonderful fantasies, and maybe life in America now has become more of a fantasy than something real. And, but this is, we have many of these available with castration. I'm going to jump this one. It's, Norman Rockwell's from Massachusetts. This is a $30 plate that he dreamed up. And every time you find maudlin sentimentality, you better be careful because you're about to be had. And we have the, $30 a plate, that's pretty good. Mother here with her two lovely children, their teddy bear, the doll, evening prayers. No, mother's blessing. Notice mother, now Rockwell was one of the greatest designers and craftsmen of all time. And he died the richest artist who'd ever lived. Nobody ever got as rich as he got in art. Notice the hand, it's kind of curious. It's not on top of her head. It's on the back of the head as though it were directing the head in that direction towards her brother. I assume it's her brother. And let me show you the, there you go. Now again, this is not as technically refined as perhaps the Bigalio crucifix, but it's a forearm of the boy in the shape of penis. Now if Rockwell wanted to make that forearm in the shape of forearm, he knew exactly how to do it. Or if he wanted to make a penis out of it, he knew. He also knew these techniques. Well, first, one of the first subliminals in Rockwell paintings I discovered was October 1917 on a cover of the Saturday Evening Post. He was very skillful at putting this stuff into his art. Very skillful. And it made his art worth more. And it did something very similar to Michelangelo. I'm going to jump the Honda ad. Oops. Okay, this was on the paperback of my first book. And it had been out for several months. Can you sharpen a bit, sharpen on the lettering, please? We had a party for some students, and they came in with this, and they seemed very troubled. Then why in the hell did they put a martini on the rocks with a twist on the cover of your book? Because the book really takes on, it declares war against the alcoholic people for using subliminal techniques to sell an addictive substance. And so I, at the time, there was a party going on. I didn't think about it for several days, but one night after dinner, I was drinking a martini on the rocks with a twist, and I started comparing my martini with this one. This one looked better. It was much better. My real martini did not have a little man standing on a lemon peel. He's half an inch high on the book. And we also used him on a poster, I think they're around the campus somewhere. Over the years, my students have referred to him as Slasher, I hope with some affection. Nor did my martini have an ice cube with a woman painted in it. You can see her pointed nose, her eyes, her open mouth, and her black hair up here, her left arm and hand with her finger pointing, like an older woman scolding, perhaps a mother scolding her naughty little Flasher. And I kept looking around, and finally down in the bottom of the glass we found Dad. His two eyes, nose, a mustache, and a shaved head. I thought it might have been something personal in it, but then I'd never worn a mustache. Now, at the time, I had to spend a weekend in New York. I went to Brooklyn, to Brooklyn Art Museum for an exhibit of anamorphic art. And anamorphics are a way of distorting visual information, throwing it out of kilter. And the technique was played around with by a number of artists. One, Holbein's painting The French Ambassadors at the British Museum shows these two, it's a life-size painting of two men, very ornately dressed, and across the foreground is a slash of light. As you walk through the British Museum to see this, you approach the painting. At a certain point in space where the vanishing point and the observation points intersect, for just a moment as you pass that point, this stream of light coalesces into a skull. So what they had done here was, I had made, after seeing that exhibit, I had made an anamorphoscope, a curved, round 3-inch pickle jar with mirrored mylar, and just set it here and looked at these shadows and lights. They're upside down here, but they were right side up as they reflected. And this is what I saw, almost a textbook example of anamorphic projection. There you go. See the line of the hat, the eye, the nose, the upper lip, mouth, and so forth. I'll go back and show you in this form. As far as I could discover, no one had ever mentioned anamorphic projections and related it to behavior, to modifying behavior. And that's what it's being used for here. And it's used, the techniques used very frequently in alcoholic beverage habits. Now, there are more and more devious routes into the unconscious of the American consumer. Here's the line of the hat. Upside down, of course. This is the eye. This would be the nose. In this form, unrecognizable. Upper lip, the mouth, lower jaw. Unrecognizable in this form, but the brain will, and I've demonstrated this, put this in and make sense out of it. It's like putting stuff in a rock album backwards, or at different speed variations. The brain will recognize the content. Okay. Finally, Pablo Picasso's painting, Woman Asleep, The Dream. First exhibited in Paris in 1932, and I cut this, can you make it smaller so we get it all on the stage, all on the screen? Yeah, that's good. Now, if we can get it in focus. I had students, I was interested in this, was in Life magazine in April 1932, where I photographed the painting. And later, it's in the Guts collection in New York, permanently valued in the millions and millions and millions priceless. And featured, if you go to the library, look up your art folios tomorrow, you can find this thing very easily. It's a very famous painting. Woman Asleep, The Dream. Now, I had the students go out, and we found 18 reviews just in English of this painting over a 48-year period. including the 8-page review of Picasso in the 1932 issue of Life magazine. And we did abstracts of each of these reviews. We made brief statements out of them, and came up with about 2 pages of one-liners, summaries of what these 18 reviews had talked about. And they talked about the use of non-complementary colors. Several mentioned the awkward wallpaper. This wallpaper is very bad. And any of my daughters could have made better wallpaper than that, you know, for much cheaper. They talked about the voluptuous curvatures of the female form shown in one-dimensional abstract. Some of them talked about how the woman's hands, there were 3 comments in these 18 articles about how her hands appeared so lifeless, so relaxed, truly not a tendon or a muscle tight, a woman asleep because of the relaxed hands. So when you get through analyzing something, first you ask, okay, what did I find? What is there? And you go back and look at it again and say, what was left out? Well, the title of the painting is Woman Asleep, the Dream. Not one word was ever mentioned in these reviews about the dream. Okay, this is important because you know, if somebody asked me to review a painting like this, I go, well, what's she dreaming about? That'd be a normal question to ask. Nobody did. Well, you can see what she's dreaming about. On the top plane of her head, it's a shaft that goes up, down, has a head on it here. Another way of asking questions, what does she have on her mind? Well, you can perceive what she has on her mind. And further, he painted it purple. And purple, if you've been around art departments and ad agencies, you know purple is a genital color. This is a cream color here, this is a light shade of purple here. So that's not terribly remarkable. I know men dream a while. Now there's something dissonant about this picture, something really crude about this picture. This woman asleep, dreaming about what we know she's dreaming about, has 6 fingers on each hand. Now, if he were to err, he's human, he might have come in a little hungover one morning. He could have given 6 fingers on one hand. But unless he did it on purpose, he wouldn't get 6 fingers on both hands. So we had a mystery to solve. Well, the students went back and dug around in Renaissance art, and they found a lot of examples, some by Da Vinci, of multiple arms, hands, fingers, toes, legs, and so forth, demonstrating movement. Quite clearly, you look at a hand, there are 5 fingers, but when you move those fingers, there seem to be more than 5. So she's moving her fingers down here, and that's what she's got in her mind up there. Picasso's made a rather curious, even perhaps humorous commentary on the human condition. And you can imagine him back in the early 30s laughing his way to the bank every morning over what the critics were saying about his art. Because he had to know what was going on here, because he didn't. One slip of the brush, and there's no way this could have ended up as a full-page reproduction in Life magazine. I'm going to terminate now. If you turn the lights on, please, and cut the projector, and if you would, please leave the projector running, so leave the fan running, so it doesn't melt. Hold on, we'll get the lights on in just a minute, and I'll try to field your questions. Okay, hour and a half. That's longer than I intended. I apologize. Yes, sir, go ahead, Anthony, right on the aisle. Popularize the war. Popularize the war. Well, that was one of a number of things apparently Hildebrand did. But that was not a spontaneous, it just didn't happen. Somebody was paid to make it happen. And we were all being very patriotic about it, remember? And, okay, anyone? Let me come down there because I don't like standing up here. This stage is like a bakery. It's hot up there. It seems like it just collects the heat. Okay, go ahead, fire away. Yes, sir.
What's advertising agency said in response to your...
What did the ad agency say in response to my work? Probably not terribly much you could talk about Nick's company. No, I think they're stupid because they stonewalled it. They said there's no such thing as subliminals. Nonsense. I didn't make this stuff up, and I didn't make a lot of money out of doing it. Somebody McLuhan said one time, you didn't start the fire, you just turned in the alarm. No, I think they would impart, but they cannot admit it. If they admit it, they're making something that's grossly immoral. This is disastrous. This makes a farce out of the whole idea of media. Simply a con job. And we have to admit it, an incredibly clever one, but we're very good at that in this country. And there's nothing in this culture right now that is independent of this. There's no way the ad guys can walk off and say the drug thing and the rest of the stuff that's going on is our fault. Like hell it is. $2 billion worth of booze advertising a year. 99% of it employing these techniques. Alcohol addiction in this country is outrageous. Most civilized countries have outlawed and banned alcohol advertising and cigarette advertising. These are the two entry drugs in this culture. You start with these. I've been all week in places like Alabama lecturing. This is Alcohol Prevention Week. And I prepared a special lecture, not the one I gave you tonight, on alcohol and tobacco advertising. And I hadn't really, I just thought about it. I take on everybody in my books and stuff. But you put this stuff together in a 2-hour lecture, it's frightening. And as I say, to my experience, 99% of booze ads and cigarette ads incorporates this material, which will initiate consumption and sustain it. And that smooth character. Those guys ought to be put in jail. There's a whole book full of federal law prohibiting the advertising of cigarettes to children. And they've been violating it, to my personal knowledge, for 30 years. And laughing about it. Go ahead, he was, I think, excuse me, hold on just a moment. Back there, young, with the blue shirt. Okay, you. In where? Oh yeah, I've got a lot of my books. I could take the hell into that on this thing. Look, the ad agencies, long ago we turned over our electoral prerogatives to the ad people. This is a multi-million-dollar industry. They sell the candidates. And, when you're spending that kind of money, you have to optimize the return on the investment. You play to win, you don't play to lose. If you know about this stuff, you find a way to use it. I have looked at, and every time I find it, I get my head bashed in by media. The individual newspaper guys, they see it in their case there. I see it, I'm no quarrel about it. They go back to their office and they write something about this crazed ex-college professor with all of his dirty pictures he finds in media. So I stay the hell away from politics. You do it. It'd make a dandy PhD dissertation. You might get away with it in this university. Why wouldn't you try it at the University of California or Illinois or Iowa? State universities are dominated by behaviorists, which all maintain there's no such thing as the unconscious. Forget it. Go ahead, sir. I think
well, if this has been going on for so long, it would be amazing that somebody from the advertising industry wouldn't own up to it.
How? They should own up to this. Let's think. I know a group, because I've done that Judas Priest thing for 3 years. I know some of these attorneys around the country who do personal damage suits, who are now looking for a candidate. They want a nice older person who's dying of some respiratory disease. He's got to be able to live about 5 years, which takes a lot longer to get to court, who doesn't have diabetes or any other complication. This is strictly, and who's loyally smoked Camels for the last 30 years. And once they find him, the guy will die, but he will leave in a state of some substantial degree. And he may end up owning a big chunk of R.J. Reynolds Nabisco. In fact, they were very clever about this. It started with Ken Erickson, did the design work on this. Then it moved to Young and Rubicon. I was responsible for it. One of my former students in Toronto edits a magazine called Marketing. She called me one day and said, I hadn't seen her in years, and said, hi, what's going on, what's new? And I said, well, have you heard about this little character? No, tell me. So I told her pretty much what I told you. And she wrote this big article with pictures and made fun of the advertising industry. They were denying this and said, well, we're all college graduates, we're not perverts. We wouldn't do a thing like that. And so it was a funny article, I mean humorous, very humorous. That ended up 2 weeks later on the desk of the chief executive officer of R.J. Reynolds Nabisco. And I have a friend who works in the office, and he said it was like watching Mount Vesuvius go off. By lunchtime Monday morning, he had fired some 250 people. He fired the ad agency, and it ended up that they got some people from Young and Rubicon to set up an independent agency to handle this. And I'm sure their strategy was based on trying to limit liability, but this is going to go. And so the lawyers find the right case to test it. And that little man with the erection has been on there since 1913. And it induces people to smoke Camel cigarettes. And there is a mountain of scientifically credible evidence to validate this whole hypothesis. You can check the bibliographies out in my various books and so forth. So this is going to be fun. Yes, sir, go ahead.
When the art directors and the copywriters get together to build an image, do they usually build the subliminal images around an image that they've designed? Meaning, do they use these subliminal images to make the image, or do they first come up with an image and then implement these?
Okay, how do they manufacture it?
Right.
I think because we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people, some of them very gifted, very creative. You'd have to say that anything that can be done probably is done somewhere or another. To my knowledge, the artists I've talked to, now I've shown you the cream. There's a lot of lesser, not so clever stuff around that's used for this. This is done usually by artists who work freelance. They're not production artists. The half dozen so that I met personally are men, late 40s, early 50s, at the top of their professional careers, making six-figure income easily. Now, if you can do this, the bottom line, of course, is once it's on the back cover of Time or Playboy, maybe 6 months or a year down the line, will it sell enough product to make back your investment in media? Now, according to the Department of Commerce, about 5% in the distillers, 5% of their gross receipts are reinvested in advertising. Level, let's say if you spend $1 million, you'd have to sell $20 million of product in order to get that $1 million back. Nobody stays in business breaking even. That they would have to make 30 or 40 million. You'd have to go 30 or 40 million gross in order to justify its existence. And they do. It's a big numbers. But advertising is a business investment. And if it doesn't make money, the IRS gets terribly upset about it. It's done to make money. Now, there have been proposals before the Senate and the House a number of times to not let advertising remain a deductible, a business deductible. And there's a good many people, especially the people who oppose alcohol and tobacco, who would like to see this happen. I would like to see it happen. I think of this stuff enough. I wouldn't like to see it shut down, because the so-called subliminal has, the composers were into this 5 centuries ago. It's taken polyphonic sound, the early choral orchestrations. You have 4 levels, let's say, one going that way, one going the other way, and all 4 of these intertwine. And all you're consciously hearing is a melody line. But the richness of all four of those voices in polyphonic are having an effect upon your mind, your hearing apparatus. But consciously, you're only focusing on a very tiny portion of it. It's like listening to Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. And you look up in the orchestra in the percussion section, the guy up there with a little triangle, he's just beating the hell out of it. You don't hear a thing, consciously. But take that triangle out and the music is different. Okay, we're talking about something that is very normal to the human condition and has been used by artists, by composers, sculptors, and other people for many, many centuries. It has, I think, in the work of someone like Michelangelo in the Sistine Chapel, enriched our understanding and knowledge of the human condition. He has probed in those frescoes the frailty, the pretensions, the preposterous ambitions of humans and what happens to them because of it. It's a magnificent thing. Now, there's a lot of tricky sexual stuff up there. And I can't believe this was one of the great men that he just put dirty pictures up there for fun. It was part of probing into the human condition. So this has a positive aspect. And this is not something abnormal. This is something we have done. It developed phylogenetically throughout our evolution. Now, understand it, use it, enrich your lives with it. Because he had people just hooked onto a good thing, and with all their power and all their money and all their creativity, were able to use it to money motives. Okay, this has other potential applications. Hold on a second, go ahead, I think you were first.
I once saw a documentary by a Christian group regarding satanic rock lyrics and the way they subliminally added them through backmask in different, basically recording it backwards in different songs. They also mentioned, and they showed the evidence of it by playing it backwards, satanic lyrics included in a live version of a Led Zeppelin song. And that just strikes me as being very seemingly coincidental. Although supposedly...
No, they did it. I have recordings of that. I pulled it up. It's there. All of that heavy metal stuff. Look, they hooked it up. They added... Now, this is CBS Records, which was bought by Sony 3 years ago for $2 billion. This is big bucks. They own 7 or 8 of the major heavy metal groups in the country. Now, those heavy metal groups summer last year with the Judas Priest group. They're all multimillionaires. One lives in Cannes, one lives Rolls Royces. They can barely read and write. This was done by people like, there are more PhDs running around CBS Records than there are at MIT. And this is what they do. Look, I took those lyrics and one album apart, line at a time, and they were, the authorship of the lyrics was attributed to one of the rock groups. I found lines of Sailing Through the Wind that was in the Oxford English Dictionary. It was used by Shakespeare in the 15th century, by Chaucer in the 13th century. And they wouldn't know Shakespeare and Chaucer from the Man in the Moon. This was put together by a pro, a poet, who was probably paid very well, as did a lot of the lyric stuff originated. So I don't think they understood what they were doing. Now they do some of the tricks. They admitted on witness stand, under cross-examination. Yeah, we hide stuff in the lyrics all the time. But of course we didn't do it in this album that caused these 2 boys to kill themselves. They admitted this right openly. We brought in engineers who worked for us. We had to bring them in almost under the threat of death. They didn't want to talk about it. We talked about things they did. They hid in the lyrics. They call punching in. They punched words in, like the Judas Priest thing. You're punched in between phrasing, and your brain is listening to foreground. This stuff slips in the background. You don't consciously pick up on it. There was one that I mentioned in one of the books called a group Blue Suede, Hooked on a Feeling. I think so. Maybe some of you probably remember it. And in the foreground, you have this chant, ooga shuka, ooga shuka, ooga shuka, ooga shuka. And you listen to that thing all day, and you don't hear that tricky line. Your mind cuts it out. That thing kicked it up to about a 3 million level of sales in a matter of months. Okay, it's just old stuff to people in the business. They know about it, they joke about it. I spent 3 years studying one damn album. We converted it from analog to digital in a Macintosh computer. We could take words and phrases apart, syllables apart. We could examine in great detail, elongating the space between, the pause between words, between phrases. We got through, we had a very remarkable analysis. Unfortunately, it was terribly complicated. And if you ever get into court, judges are very simplistic creatures. They like things very simple, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. And you start fuzzing it up on them and you know, want to think a little bit. Well, we lost the case. But the judge in his decision had so many holes in it, why he left it wide open for appeal. We should know within the next 3 or 4 weeks whether the Supreme Court will consider the appeal, will reverse the case or not. There were certainly grounds for reversal. But then again, it was the young attorneys. They were overzealous. He tried very hard, but they got this judge just totally bedazzled. He sat there, he didn't know what the hell was going on in the courtroom for at least 3 or 4 days. And while we presented all this very technical information. Oh, I don't know, this is, for me, it was quite an adventure. I learned an awful lot. I never knew when that was brought to me, I had never heard of heavy metal rock music. I don't know anybody. If any of my kids brought that stuff home, I'd send them immediately to a psychiatrist. No, where have I failed? What did I do? Where did I go wrong? It's bizarre. It's trash. Garbage of the worst kind. It's not even music, it's noise. High amplitude sound, one of the things I found out was that people become addicted to high amplitude sound. Don't become addicted to heavy metal music. There's nothing there to become addicted to. High amplitude sound, I'm talking about 130 to 140 decibels. You get up to 150, you're standing 100 yards away from a Saturn rocket taking off. And the increase in decibels is logarithmic, it's not additive. And at about 140, you get earaches. And you get 140 out of a headset with a cheap amplifier from Radio Shack. It's the size of the resonance chamber that actually produces the dB levels. And I interviewed 200 of these metalheads across the country. I must have interviewed 30 or 40 of them who were addicted to high amplitude sound, including 2 boys in Roseburg, Pennsylvania, who picked up 2 young children. They spent 10 hours one day in a pickup truck with a boom machine in it, listening to Judas Priest, Guns N' Roses, AC/DC, the rest of the crap. And they picked up these 2 children, 9 and 10 years old, took them home, raped them, tortured them, cut their throats. The boy was tried for murder with an 80-year sentence. I was brought in by a public defender, and my testimony on the subliminal effects of heavy metal rock was one of 5 factors the jury cited as the reasons they mitigated the sentence from the death penalty down to life imprisonment. That was the first time it's ever been in court. It was in a capital murder case. And, okay, this stuff, hammering at your head at that volume level in a restricted space creates pain. I went around the casinos in Reno and Vegas talking to musical directors and musicians. And what do you guys do between acts? We go down to the local hospital and get shots for earache. Our ears hurt all the time. Okay, pain induces something called endorphins. I talked to pharmacologists at UCLA Med and at Stanford Med working on this thing. They believe it's one of the influences involved in drug addiction. You can actually become addicted. Endorphins are a powerful analgesic. There are 3 known types of them. I can call them alpha, theta, and gamma. And they reduce the pain. They also addict you. People with bulimia and it's a starvation thing. Anorexia. This is, again, one of the things that seems to become focused. Dieting at that extreme is painful. The pain induces endorphins, and you become addicted to the pain. You're caught in a trap, of which about 10% of anorexics die. Very common around colleges and universities. So this endorphin thing is fascinating. But it was one of the things the judge wouldn't let me bring into court in testimony. Because it was a First Amendment right, you can do this if you want. It's guaranteed by the Constitution, listen to any damn thing you want. This judge was, I thought he was a very troubled man. But we'll get another crack at it. Go ahead, sir.
I'd read, I don't know if it was an article or a book, that before it was outlawed, or made illegal.
What was made illegal?
In cinema, they'd have one frame or two frame images of buy Coca-Cola or buy things like that. The reason I asked that is how prevalent is subliminal in the moving picture industry?
Oh, very prevalent, but it's so easy. They don't use tachistoscopes anymore. A friend of mine invented it's a high-speed projector that flashes in 1/3000th of a second, and you can do every 3 seconds, every 10 seconds. It's too bulky, too difficult. You bring one of those things into a theater, you can get into a lot of trouble. It's much simpler to do it at a low level of light intensity. I called a friend of mine at Coca-Cola, and I wanted to borrow in the early days a tachistoscope. I knew they were around. People had them, ad agencies had them. He says, well, we got rid of ours a couple of years ago. He says, I'll tell you how to make one. Just take your and put a rheostat in the power cord. So you can project it onto a movie screen. While the movie's going on, just keep turning a light down until it's there, but it's not visible. Now, it's better than a tachistoscope because it's in the signal all the time. Tachistoscope, you take an oscilloscope and you look at it, so you see those blips. You know something's going on, you keep looking, you'll find it. But with this thing, you never know because it's part of the signal, a steady part of the background. And it works much better than the tachistoscope. If you want to play around with those, you work on your professors, there's some of the build. But there are a lot of ways. Let's take in the movie Rocky, one of the most common techniques is Rocky and his manager standing in the street talking. And behind them on this building is an enormous Coca-Cola sign. Now you never think that that's an ad. You don't even look at the building, but yet you do perceive it. And that would never have surfaced except the producer of that movie, which was Stallone apparently, got greedy, and he sold the same thing to Pepsi. And Pepsi started fighting with Coke over it, it surfaced, it came out, and of course this is done in every TV series. Anytime you see a product in a TV or a film, somebody's paid for it. At big bucks, that sign was worth over $250,000. Big money. It works more effectively than any consciously perceived ad would. Go ahead, sir, in the back, yeah. You, yeah. Man, I'm sorry, forgive me. I don't have my glasses on. You ask why, and unfortunately the only way you can answer questions like that is a theory. And we could talk from now until 8 o'clock tomorrow morning about the various theories. From the advertising people's point of view, they want to know one thing. Ad research is very simplistic. Go, no go. Works, it doesn't work, dump it. Come up with something it doesn't. They never ask why. That immediately gets you into a more ethical, moral polemic. It would be big trouble. And the questions, as I say, can only be answered in terms of theoretical ideas about castration. You know, a long series of theories that involve women in the castration theory thing. You know, you open that Pandora's box, and I'm not sure it's terribly valuable. It's interesting to know about it, and know that there's nothing about this that's for certain. Like all theories, these theories, and this unfortunately they didn't tell you around universities, nobody ever told me, theories are not true. They're conjecture, speculation, quite often wishful thinking. All the theory has to be is useful, and you can use various theories for a lot of things. Until somebody comes up with a better one, which they inevitably seem to do. So I think you're in very thin ice when you start thinking about theories as truth. I mean, if they were true, you wouldn't call them theory, you'd call them something else. And I don't know a theory that's true. Not one. I know a lot I wish were true, but unfortunately, I have to back away. Go ahead, sir, on the aisle. Not completely. I think by familiarizing yourself with this and going in with a very critical attitude, you'll have greater autonomy as an individual than you might normally have. But I think this has to become kind of a part of your own individual life process. There's no quick and dirty way you can protect yourself, no. As I tried to point out, some of the stuff is very difficult to find. Now, I found over the years, some things I find very quickly, students never get to. Some things they will find very easily, I won't get to. Men seem to find it easier with certain kind of material than women, and vice versa. So there's a lot of variables in this. So I'd say, no, I could let you find something in an ad. And you say, I know what the rascals are doing. I got this figured out. I catch you with something you didn't pick up. Strategically, there is no defense. I'm working on a project, or I've been working on a project in Panama with Special Forces, and they're calling this stuff a weapons system. The government's been researching this for at least 25 years. You're never going to get your hands on any of that research. No way. It's all high classified. This is kind of a dirty tricks operation against the drug cartels. Infiltrating CB radio, anything that moves, with all kinds of nasty little problems, like fear of being caught, increasing contempt for DEA agents and U.S. operatives, on the basis of los hombres no tienen huevos, men without balls, todos son maricones, they're all queer. And okay, you increase that contempt, and they make a lot more mistakes, and you bust them more frequently. Every trick in the book. Someday that thing will open up. It's going to make a hell of a good book. Nobody's going to believe it, but one day, it will get out and around, and people can look at the data, perhaps. Hold on, go ahead, sir.
I don't know if I'm taking this a bit too far, but we've been discussing it for the past 5 minutes. Could you turn around and take a look at this painting around you?
I'm afraid to now. No, tell me, what's back there? I don't want to know.
Well, we have 2 penis looking on the side. Okay, we're looking at a medium color of top here.
Okay, you've asked a very important question. Let me answer it with some detail. The first thing I had to get into when I started this stuff was Rorschach, Herman Rorschach. Now, the Rorschach ink blot is almost, and it's still used as a diagnostic technique in mental clinics. Very useful. It's almost mathematically constructed. If you put anything into a Rorschach ink blot, you're making it up. It's nothing there. Now, the question is profound in that you're asking, how do you discriminate between fantasy, something you make up, and reality? It's really there. Somebody put it there. So I used to take a class out for the second and third lecture, and we'd lay in the grass in front of the building and look at the clouds for an hour. And you would be astonished at the filth that's floating around up there. Okay, see, the job is you've got to make some kind of determination. What I'm looking at, a fantasy projection, or is it the product of human manipulation? And that question becomes, look, we made our fantasies in the society far more attractive, exciting than the reality. Reality is a pain. Look at women. Women are imperfect creatures. Blotches on their skin, veins in their legs. One breast always hangs lower than the other. But when you get a hold of a Playboy centerfold, this is perfection immaculate. There never was a woman this perfect. And never will be, of course. Now, if you imprint, as you masturbate your way through puberty, on Playboy centerfolds, and you get this mixed up with reality, you can have a very lonely life. Because you're never going to find a woman like that, anywhere. So a lot of men, boys, have already, this has happened. Just check out the divorce rate. This is quite serious. The management of puberty in this culture. Oh boy. Take a good look at those magazines sometime. Well, they know, I got into Playboy one time in Chicago, the big building, 20th floor, they shot the centerfolds, and then the third floor was We magazine. I knew the editor then of We. Playboy doesn't own it anymore. And he used to call me, we'd talk, and say, well, next time in Chicago, I'd come in, let me show you the stories. He said, you've never seen a place like this. So one day I had a lecture somewhere near Chicago, and I flew in early, and they met me at the airport, took me to breakfast, and I spent the whole day there. And, well, you're right, I never saw anything like that before. I talked to over 40 people, and I took notes. Editors, writers, artists, photographers, you know, all those highly skilled, very well paid individuals who work there. They're pretty good at what you do. So that evening, about 5, I met back with the managing editor of We in his office, and there were 4 or 5 other senior staff there. And he said, well, what do you think of us? And, you know, tomorrow I go back to the West, and henceforth I can tell everyone I have been at the fountainhead of American sexuality. So you guys invented all this stuff we're doing. When I was a kid, I mean, we didn't have B&D and S&A and all this stuff. But now, my God, what a rich life these youngsters are having in their fantasy. And, you know, they all laughed at that. And I said, and I was thumbing through notes, I said, there's something today that troubled me. I talked to 40 people. And almost every one of them, within a minute of our conversation, after we started talking, I found myself involved in a conversation about masturbation. I spent the whole day at Playboy talking about jacking off. You guys do this all the time? Sure. What do you think this is about? Well, I mean, I grew up with the same problems most young men have. Suddenly, Playboy is a masturbation manual. You might even call it a handbook. And I didn't want to know this. I think you guys didn't have to tell me that. Leave me alone. I mean, my innocence. And sure it is. I saw research done by Masters and Johnson in St. Louis on masturbatory behavior. I mean, big stuff. I mean, big money stuff. The Playboy Foundation was sponsoring it. They knew more about masturbation than anybody I've ever talked to in the world. Of course, they had a $100 million empire based upon masturbation. Wow. I mean, these kinds of discoveries, you know, they're overwhelming. Especially if I were young, I don't know whether I could really handle it or not. I might, you know, go queer or something. Worst could happen. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. Oh, I don't really feel like getting into that too deeply. On the album cover, I'll give you that one. You know what the album cover looks like? It has an android. Huh? On the Judas Priest, I'm tired, I'm having trouble recalling. I'm blocking out the name of that album. This was Better By You, Better Than Me. One of the songs in it. That was one of the songs that were key to the suicidal thing. Class. Class is the name of the title. Steam Class was the album. That thing, we spent 3 years on that damn album. That's why I can't remember it. Okay, on the album cover, there's they call it an android, a mechanical man-looking thing. And in the ear, there's a number of phallic symbols, penises, designed into the face, much like the smooth character. But in the ear of the android, the ear looks like a penis. You lay it on the side. And I didn't get to this until I got the color separation. We subpoenaed the color separations so I could look at them individually. And in the black, with a little bit in the red, in that ear was the word suicide, spelled S-U-I-S-I-D-E. And it is very light. I mean, you could perceive it. It would be perceivable very readily. Now they were saying this thing album had nothing to do with suicide. Now we analyzed the lyrics much as though you'd analyze an Elizabethan sonnet. Everything, well, it was suicide, satanic, Satan, all full of delicious little things. But the word suicide appeared in the ear on the album cover. Now, the cover becomes part of the listening experience because as the boys, the two suicide spent 6 hours listening to this one album. They passed that album back and forth between them. One of them had given the album to the other for a birthday present. It was one of the boys' birthday. And so they thought very much of the album, passed it back and forth, and studied the cover. They had to see the word suicide. And at this subliminal level, that would serve under certain conditions. Had they a predisposition to suicide before they entered the room, that could be the catalyst. Though there was a good deal more related to suicide in the whole thing. There was a part of the drawing of that android where it showed an outline of a human head and the whole back of the head was blown off. If you look at the cover, the android has a bullet going through its head, like a stream of light. How many of you know that cover? It's been some time now, but a lot of young people do have that album around. Suicide was clearly suggested on the cover of that album. And it was confirmed by the lyrics, by the material that was embedded in between phrases and the rest of it. And I'm getting all kinds of signs from him to shut up and go home. One more question, go ahead.
I was just wondering, you were talking about this before. How do you know that all this stuff is really there, or if it's there because you want to see it, like you're looking for it?
Because I showed it to you, and all but 3% of you, 3% went home a long time ago. Okay, you know, that's one of the ways you test a projection. Fantasy projections randomize. You'll see one thing, you'll see something else. Maybe 2 or 3 of you will agree with him, but 6 others of you will see something quite different. If it's really there, all of you, except that 3%, will probably agree. Yeah, I saw it. And that's what I was sure you did tonight. You've been very kind and very patient. I've enjoyed this. I hope you have. Thank you.